without further ado, we're going to thank you for coming back. We know it's been a really long day, but this guy's a real treat. And it took me a while to get him to come here, but we got him to do it. We actually went back and forth a lot.
We actually had to corner him at South by Southwest
and pummel him and everything else. But he's a really interesting entrepreneur, very much a visionary, many people think, in space and in cars and in all solar, all kinds of things.
So, first of all, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
And we are sorry for having cornered you at South by Southwest.
No worries.
Not that sorry, but okay.
Yeah.
Barged
Great
into your
shoes, by the way.
Thank you. Do you like those?
dinner.
Okay.
I'd like to start by, I mean, you're involved in several really cutting-edge kinds of things that are cool. But let's talk for a minute about this, the electric car, which is really an old concept in the car industry, right?
It is, actually. Yeah.
But, you know, there's a modern take on it. Why are you in that business, and do you agree with what has been written about you, that it's fair to say that you have proven this is this can be sold at a profit in market conditions?
Sure. So the reason for Tesla was not because I thought that there was some huge opportunity in electric cars, or that I thought it was some rank-ordered best way to get a return on investment or something like that. In fact, I think starting at a car company, particularly electric car company, would have to rank as one of the dumbest things you could possibly do on that scale.
Okay.
And it may seem like, I mean, today obviously we've got quite a high market cap. Let's call it that.
Yes, you do.
So it may seem, oh, well, this is sort of obviously a good thing to have done, but for many years, people regarded this. In fact, most people, almost all people, regarded it as stupid or insane or both. You know, to have done that. So it's not. So the reason for doing it was not because I thought it was some great opportunity. The easiest thing for me to have done after PayPal would have been to start a new internet company. Mm-hmm. That would have been like falling off a log. I mean, really easy. And so the reason I did it was because it was clear that we were not going to see electric cars from the incumbent manufacturers. For a while there, I thought that we potentially would, because you had the EV1 from General Motors, for example. And it seemed like the obvious thing to do would then be to do the EV2, EV3. Frankly, if General Motors had done that, they would be in a far better position today. But then instead, what General Motors did was, as soon as California changed the regulations, they recalled the EV1s. And just to make sure that nobody could get them back, they took them to a junkyard and crushed them. And if you've seen the movie Who Killed the Electric Car, you'll see that they actually, those customers tried their best to keep the cars, and when the cars were taken to the junkyard and crushed, they held a candlelit vigil.
Yeah, because the cars were leased; they were not ever sold outright. Yeah.
Yeah. They held a candlelit vigil as though it was someone dying, and I think that should be a pretty big wake-up call. If people are holding a candlelit vigil for your product, then maybe you shouldn't cancel it.
As you're killing it.
Yeah, maybe you shouldn't cancel it. So, but they did, and so they canned all electric vehicle activity. So the reason for Tesla was to show that it actually is possible to create a compelling electric car, or long-range car, electric car, and if you did that people would buy it. Because the car industry was operating on what I believe to be two false premises. One was that you could not make a compelling electric car, one that was aesthetically appealing, long-range, high performance, all these things. And that even if you did all those things, the car industry's opinion was that people would still not buy it because it was electric. And they had some fondness for for burning gasoline.
What moved you into it? What was starting? You said internet company like falling off a log. Easy to do. Why that area then?
Why electric cars?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think it's important that we transition to sustainable transport. If we don't transition to sustainable transport, obviously tautologically it's unsustainable. And even if there were not an environmental issue, in fact, even if you were to say hypothetically that emitting carbon was good for the environment, mm-hmm. Because of the scarcity of oil and natural gas and so forth, we would eventually face extremely high gasoline costs, and the economy would grind to a halt if we did not find some sustainable means of transport.
Do you worry that the electricity that is generated and used when the cars are recharged and plugged in a lot of it is generated from coal? Does that bother you?
Yeah, I mean, depending on where you are in the country, say roughly half of it is not coal, but so roughly half of it is hydrocarbon based. However, there are two obvious rebuttals to that. One is that if you take the same source fuel and you burn it at the power plant level, you will get 2 to 3 times the efficiency than if you burnt it in the car itself. Because at the power plant level, you're not constrained by mass and volume. So you can have something that's big and heavy, and you can also take the waste heat and generate a steam and use it to turn a steam turbine. So you get what's called cogeneration. So your maximum extractable energy is much greater with a stationary power plant than if you burnt that same fuel in a mobile transport where you have far more constraints. And then the other factor is that we have to find sustainable means of electricity production anyway. So if you believe in that predicate, you can write that predicate and say, given that we must have sustainable electricity production, the obvious move for transport is electric.
So when you're talking about these ideas of doing this particular thing, one of the things that I think struck a lot of people about you is the scale of the vision. That it's not, one, that it's very difficult, 2, that it's a little crazy, going along with SpaceX at the same time. What do you imagine is, you've had many years doing this, many critics, you're not going to make it, you're getting a lot of, Walt was going to ask about subsidies, I think, that you get.
We'll talk about that.
Yeah. What is why these kind of projects? This is sort of a bigger question I want you to think about, but the idea of the bigness of the project, because there's been the industry's been littered with electric car funerals, essentially, and not as many candlelight vigils, obviously. But
right. Yeah, there've been many car company failures, not just electric, of course. And honestly, if I had like $1 for every time somebody brought up DeLorean or Tucker, I wouldn't need an IPO. Mm-hmm. It would have been perfectly financed just on that alone. But I don't know. When I was in college, I wanted to be involved in things that I thought would affect the world, and there were 3 areas that I thought would most affect the world, and one of them was the internet. So did a couple of companies in that, but then it seemed like after PayPal, I was like, there's a lot of really talented entrepreneurs and a lot of capital doing internet ventures. So it didn't seem like I could necessarily be all that incrementally useful in the internet arena. And so it was time to then go to the other 2 areas, which were sustainable energy and space exploration, in particular, developing the technology necessary to make life multiplanetary.
So multiplanetary life might be more interesting than cars. We'll get into that shortly. But I do have to ask you, it's very important that you've made an attractive car with longer range than you're right, than people thought possible, that's electric, all electric. But it's fairly expensive, I think, at least up front.
Sure, yeah.
And what does it cost, your most successful one?
Well, before tax credits, it's about $70,000. After tax credits, it's like $60,000.
All right, but now
we're getting to tax credits. So there's like there's some kind of federal tax credit, right?
That's right.
For buying a pure electric.
$7,500, yeah.
And then you were telling me backstage that a whole bunch of states, 15 states or something, have these?
Right. There's different types of credits. So the first thing I should say is that people think of like electric cars as receiving a subsidy, but in fact what's occurring is that they are receiving less of a subsidy than gasoline cars.
Okay.
If you would actually look at the subsidy in gasoline cars, and particularly if you price in the economic or the environmental damages, what's really occurring is that every time you buy a gasoline car, there are huge subsidies occurring, and you can actually tell that these subsidies are higher than the subsidies for electric cars, because people are not buying electric cars, except ours, and not huge numbers.
These are upstream subsidies to the oil companies and so forth for the
gas.
They're both direct.
The whole tax.
Yeah, there's some enormous number. It's like $500 billion in subsidies to.
Okay, but you also get some federal and state subsidies, right?
Yes.
And then there's these credits that you are able to sell to the other car companies. Can you explain what that is?
Sure. Although, just to emphasize again, it's pretty obvious that the credit, whatever subsidies are occurring for electric cars are less than for gasoline cars. Okay. Otherwise, things like the Chevy Volt or the Nissan Leaf would sell in large quantities, but they are not. And so that's like an obvious test. Then, with respect to zero-emission vehicle credits or ZEV credits, these apply to about 40% of the U.S. population, and they were actually put in place quite a while ago to deal with air pollution in places like LA and the Bay Area, and New York, and so forth. So whenever you're driving cars in a dense urban area, you're essentially emitting a bunch of toxic gases that negatively affect people's health and obviously the quality of the air, and it's pretty obvious in LA during the summer. So in order to motivate manufacturers to move away from that, the states enacted the ZEV credit mandate, which was that a small number of electric or zero-emission vehicles have to be made by all large-scale manufacturers. And if they don't make those vehicles, then they have to try to purchase ZEV credits from someone who has. But when we sell a ZEV credit, we sell it at 65 cents on the dollar. So the best thing that another manufacturer could make would be electric cars, because then they get 100 cents on the dollar for every tax credit.
So why don't they?
Well, I'm hopeful that they will. I think to some degree, at least some of the manufacturers were hoping that no one would come up with an electric vehicle that anyone wanted to buy, and that California and other ZEV states would repeal their ZEV mandate, because they've lobbied for that outcome many times and have thus far been unsuccessful. If Tesla was unsuccessful, then I think they would have been able to repeal the ZEV mandate.
So when you're getting into the concept of these cars, these prices are still, along with subsidies and everything else, it's still a high price tag. What is your goal? Is it to bring in, I mean, you have, there's lots of people here who own Teslas.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thank you for buying a Tesla, by the way. Just want to say, all of you guys who bought Teslas, you guys are awesome.
Some significant percentage of your customers are here, but when do you sell? There's a larger country.
Far-sighted, awesome individuals who bought Teslas.
Where do you
and actually, I'd like to say a special shout out to Tony Say, who has the largest, made the largest number of Tesla orders in the U.S. of 100 cars for his project in downtown Vegas. So thanks, Tony.
Yeah. So it's a super interesting project. But how do you get it down to levels that Tony of Zappos? No, we don't have to be Tony of Zappos to buy.
So Tesla, when we first started out, I actually wrote a blog piece outlining the Tesla strategy, and it's been out there for a long time. And it really just outlined the sort of three-step process that Tesla's going through to get to mass market compelling electric cars. And step one was making the Tesla Roadster, so high price, low volume, then mid price, mid volume, and then low price, high volume. So those are, we're in step two. The price of the Model S is actually less than it may seem at first, because the cost of gasoline is so much more than the cost of electricity that you save a lot of money.
Not buying gas.
Yeah, exactly. And that depending upon how you count it is somewhere in the $15,000 to $20,000 region.
Over the lifetime of the car?
Over sort of 7 years. Figure it's roughly $2,000 a year, depending upon what your assumptions for gas prices are. Yeah.
But when will there be a $30,000 or $35,000 Tesla?
Yeah, so step 3, I'm expecting in about 3 to 4 years.
And what's required to get you from here to there? Is it got to do with design and technology, or does it have to do
that's
with
one of the elements.
Scale, or what?
Well, I think any new technology needs at least 3 major iterations to get to the mass market. I mean, certainly cell phones have gone through many more than that. And I'm sure people remember like the Wall Street one, where he's walking down the beach on the giant brick of a cell phone on his ear. And that thing was super expensive and like lasted for 30 minutes. You couldn't even this audio quality was terrible. Now you can have a supercomputer in your pocket for $100. So with electric vehicles, similar. You're trying to compete with gasoline cars that have had 150 years and trillions of dollars spent on them. So I think if we can make it there by our 3rd generation, that's pretty awesome. So I think there's certainly design optimization is one factor, and then the other is the car will be a little bit smaller, so maybe 20% smaller than the Model S, and we'll have an order of magnitude greater production. So we have the economies of scale to help us out. I think those 3 factors will take us to 50% reduction.
And when will you be at a point where, even if you didn't have subsidies and credit sales, you would be profitable?
Yeah, so I think we're anticipating being profitable, or I should say even better, better than slightly profitable in the 4th quarter this year. We're projecting 25% gross margins absent ZEV credits.
Absent ZEV.
Absent ZEV credits.
So not getting this extra subsidy, money that
but not absent the tax subsidy.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's a consumer sort of tax credit, which is effectively something that improves the level of demand for the product, but doesn't directly affect our gross margins. So we don't get that. Tesla doesn't get the tax credit, the consumer does.
Why haven't many car companies raced to you when you're showing that there are cars, there is an audience for this? Where are the rest of these companies now?
Well, I'm hopeful that our results from the 1st quarter will cause the other car companies to enter the electric car arena in a significant way. But until now, they didn't really have a good basis for that, because they would look at, you say, well, what are the examples of successful electric cars? I mean, we did have our Tesla Roadster out there, but they wrote that off as being something that's really low volume, kind of a niche product for techno geeks type of thing, and so they wrote that off, right? Yeah, so it's actually funny, because before we were able to get the Roadster out, then they'd say, well, you couldn't possibly make that car work. And then when we made the car work, they'd say, well, nobody's going to buy it. And then people bought it. And then we announced the Model S, and so many people called bullshit on that. It was ridiculous. And yet, actually, we were able to bring it to market. And then when we brought it to market, they said, well, you're never going to be able to produce it at volume. And we did that. And then they said, you will never be able to make a profit. And then we did that in Q1. So I'm hopeful that people will observe that there's a trend here. So now that we have been profitable, I think other manufacturers are more likely to embark on electric vehicle projects. And it should also be mentioned that we do make electric powertrains for Daimler and Toyota. Mm-hmm. So for the electric RAV4, we make the battery pack and powertrain. For the Mercedes B-Class that's coming out later this year, we'll be making that whole battery pack.
Are they open to that? Do you feel as if they're open? I mean, a lot of the, you can paint the car companies any way you want, but do you feel as if they're open or thinking about that?
Yeah, I think so. The challenge is to convince them that it should be more than just a little niche product.
Or a hybrid or something like that.
Yeah. Well, they may. I mean, Toyota obviously is quite big on hybrids, but to convince them that electric cars should be a mainstream item, there's still a bit of work to do on that front.
And until they're a mainstream item, in terms of having enough of an infrastructure of charging, obviously you've done a lot to help that problem with range, but still people want to feel like they're not going to be stranded, that there are going to be charging stations. And I know...
Yeah. We've got an announcement about that tomorrow, in fact.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
You want to announce it here, now?
Well, no.
You've just sort of let the cat out of the bag. Might as well just...
Well...
Because you're so quiet and retiring mostly.
Right,
that's why.
exactly.
You never do anything, just mouth off at a New York Times reporter, for example.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. All right. Well, so we have something called the Supercharger.
Right.
Which is an advanced charging technology that we developed. Yeah, I guess I might as well let the cat out of the bag. Why not? So the supercharging technology is something we developed because obviously traditional charging has been way too slow, and it's not effective for long distance travel. So it is very important to address this issue of long distance travel because when people buy a car, they're also buying something which is a sense of freedom and ability to go anywhere that they want and not feel fettered. So we had to make something that was really quick to charge. So that's what we developed. And there are actually a bunch of them out there now in California and on the East Coast, from allowing you to go from Boston to D.C. and travel throughout California and Nevada. And what we were going to announce tomorrow is that there's going to be a dramatic acceleration of the supercharging network. Mm-hmm. And by the end of next month, we will triple the supercharger coverage area.
Wow.
Where is it going?
So it'll be. There's actually a map that will go live tomorrow, obviously. But people will be quite surprised to learn this. But at Tesla.
We'll blame it on the CEO of SpaceX.
Yeah, exactly.
Or if you want, you could blame it on me.
All right. Blame it on it's Walt's fault.
Yeah. Because, you like tangling with reviewers, and I'm a reviewer. So
yeah, but you do good reviews.
I haven't reviewed your car.
Well, I mean, I should say accurate reviews.
Thank you.
All right. So the Supercharger network, by the end of this year, will have covered most of the major metro areas of the U.S. and southern Canada. Wow. And in fact, you'll be able to drive all the way from L.A. to New York just using the Supercharger network.
Wow. So, and does that include not only putting it in places where it doesn't exist today, but also increasing the density on the two coasts?
Absolutely. Exactly. Good point. The density is not quite as good as it should be, so we're both improving the density of the supercharger stations along well-traveled routes, as well as increasing the geographic scope of the network.
That's hugely important.
It is, absolutely.
Because even, tell me if you think I'm nuts, but I think that it's like, in the old days, people would go and buy a desktop tower computer, and they would not buy one unless it had 5 slots for cards in it.
Right.
But they would
I was one of those people.
never open the computer and put a card in it.
Well, I did, yeah.
You did, but I mean, a lot of people would be told by their techie friend, you have to have, 3 empty slots or 5 empty slots, but they never opened it and put the slots in.
Yeah.
Even if you only drive your car, commuting to work well within the range of the car and a few errands and stuff, you always want that sense of freedom.
Absolutely.
If I had to, I could get in this car and go from Boston to D.C. or something.
Yeah. Yep, that's right.
I mean, psychologically, it's really very, very important to people.
It's extremely important. So on Tesla, because all Teslas are wirelessly updated via the cell networks, we actually update the supercharger locations in the car. So on the Tesla map, if you just tap the little lightning button, it'll actually direct you to the nearest supercharger. So as you're driving, you can go wherever you want. And with the release later this year, you'll be able to navigate anywhere in the country, and the car will automatically route you to the superchargers along the way.
Fantastic.
So one question before that. Is that why you hit back so hard at the times? I mean, we joke about it and stuff like that, but many people don't do that. What was the reasoning? I know you've said a lot about this, but...
Oh, brother, yeah.
What was your reasoning? Is like, you're not going to take this, or you...
Yeah, well, I mean, I thought about it a fair bit before actually responding, so it wasn't sort of just a totally off-the-cuff thing. But when the article was published, we saw a significant decrease in sales, particularly in the New York Times sort of main readership area, sort of in the northeast, particularly in cold areas. And the article, it really sort of played to people's biggest fear about electric cars, that you'll run out, and that they don't work in the cold, which is actually completely false. They do work really well in the cold. In fact, our highest sales per capita are in Norway. Mm-hmm. And the single person who's bought the single largest number as an individual of Teslas literally lives above the Arctic Circle.
Why?
He's an ophthalmologist in a... Jens Krotholm is his name. He's a great guy.
Wait, he's an ophthalmologist. He lives above the Arctic Circle, and he has a whole bunch of electric cars.
Yeah.
I just wanted to get...
I mean, what are the odds?
I just wanted to get the picture.
It's an improbable scenario, but true.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And every day he takes an electronic pill also.
Yeah, exactly. But he drove him through like the winter, which is permanent midnight, and so obviously they work pretty well. In fact, after that article, we had, since it was still sort of winter in Norway, we actually had someone do a Model S test drive from, I think, almost near the Arctic Circle to Oslo.
Okay, but as I'm a reviewer, as we've already discussed, and some people in the room know, but so part of a review is factual. This is actually what...
Only part of the review is that factual?
No.
Which, okay.
No, let me explain. Part of a review is opinion in the end.
Sure.
So, but you have to state, if you're doing specs, if you're doing, like, in my case, it's a battery test on something. I have to explain, this is how I did the battery test, this is what the result is.
Right.
I can then have an opinion. You might have a different opinion. You might say, well, even if I accept Mossberg's battery test, I don't agree with him that this is good enough battery life. I need better battery life, so I think he's too easy on this product. Or the other way around, whatever. So part of it is the facts, and part of it is what opinions you draw from that.
Sure.
The screen is this big, the camera has this, those are facts.
So
was it the facts or the guy's opinion?
No, it was a fact thing. In fact, so when we got the car back, we looked at the data logs as compared to the article that was written, and the article was factually incorrect, and in multiple places. In fact, and one could perhaps ascribe that to error on his part. But by the 10th mistake in a row that is interpreted in the wrong direction, that lacks credibility. And so, it's like if you did that battery test on something, and you said factual information that was untrue in a very important way. I mean, that's a big deal. And so if we didn't speak out against that article would live forever, and people would have this really wrong impression of the car. And they would think that what he said, if we did not oppose it, was true.
But the Times didn't back down, did they?
Actually, the public editor of the Times did an investigation and concluded that the article was wrong. We disagreed. I disagreed with the public editor over the motivation. In other words, the public editor said the article was wrong, but didn't agree that it was intentional. Whereas, in my opinion, it's difficult to interpret that as anything but intentional.
And then just to close this off, wasn't there some controversy about the fact that you had put sensors on the car that aren't normally sold on the car?
No, it was the same sensors.
Okay, all right. So this is really important, but space, the final frontier.
Sure.
What is your ultimate plan or goal for SpaceX? What is it you want to do with it? Is it just to prove that a private company can deliver stuff to the space station, or what is it?
No, like I said, it's the goal with SpaceX is to improve rocket technology and spacecraft technology and keep improving it every year until ultimately we're able to send people to Mars and establish a self-sustaining base on Mars.
Mars.
Mars, yeah.
Okay.
To make life multiplanetary, as they're saying. It's not as though I expect that this will necessarily occur. I mean, I agree that this is an unlikely outcome. But if we do not keep improving space technology every year, then that will never happen.
Didn't George W. Bush want to go to Mars?
He did, actually.
NASA
Yeah. Not many people know that.
Yeah, so that's kind of puts you and George W. Bush in the same category as people.
George is his dad.
H.W. One of them wanted a space program
George Bush
that would get us to Mars, right?
Yeah, actually, George H.W. Bush, shortly after gaining office, actually asked NASA to come up with a plan in 90 days for sending people to Mars. And NASA did come up with that plan, but it was $500 billion. So he decided that maybe wasn't such a great idea. And that was obviously 20 years ago, whatever it was, you know.
So why Mars? Explain.
When $500 billion really meant
yeah,
something.
what's attractive
Mars?
about that was really was $500 billion.
Now it's cheap, right?
Yeah, no, the defense budget's bigger than that.
Right. So why Mars? Why Mars over? Now, just to preface this, Elon went to Space Camp many years ago with Sergey, Larry, Megan, James Joaquin, Piero Midio, a bunch of you very strange people.
Shortly after I started SpaceX. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Why? And were you in a Star Trek mode, or what was the?
For Space Camp?
I know you guys did that,
okay.
but what? They had outfits.
No, before
and
when you.
But what was the?
What has it got you
for?
interested? It's because you said a few minutes ago that there were three things that you were interested in. One was the internet, one was the electric car, and the other was space. So what got you into space?
Right. So if you think about the future of humanity, it's going to fundamentally bifurcate in two directions, or life as we know it. Either it's going to become multiplanetary, or it's going to be confined to one planet until some eventual extinction event. So I think it's much more inspiring.
If you put it that way, let's go to Mars.
And by the way, I'm optimistic about life on Earth. It's not as though I think we're in danger of imminent demise.
But you're convinced there will be an extinction event.
Well, I mean, that's pretty obvious from the fossil record.
Yeah,
it's
I think about it daily.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's for sure. We face dangers that the dinosaurs didn't face because it could be
us.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We could. Yeah.
We
could do ourselves in.
They actually had better diets. The dinosaurs.
Yeah, exactly.
A lot of things they.
I just think we want to have a future ultimately where humanity is out there exploring the stars, we're a spacefaring civilization, and the things that we read about in science fiction books and see in movies becomes true. We don't want that always to be a fiction of the future. So if we don't improve space technology every year, we're never going to get there. And so the goal of SpaceX is to make as much improvement as possible, and hopefully we'll see people land on Mars in our lifetime.
I have to ask you.
That would be really great.
I just have to ask you. Have you literally looked into, or had someone look into, or are they still looking into for you whether you can do warp drive? I mean, really, does that cross your mind?
There actually does seem to be, oddly enough, some breakthrough on the whole warp drive thing, because you can't exceed the speed of light, but technically it is possible, theoretically possible, to warp space itself, so that even in your local space-time continuum, you're not traveling faster than the speed of light, but you're warping space such that space is moving.
And that's
okay,
what.
Okay, got that?
Is that a? Now wait a minute. I actually kind of
That's because
vaguely
you like
understood.
Star Trek. He goes to the Star Trek Museum in Las Vegas, so let's not talk.
Is that like in the fourth quarter or next year?
Well, I'm not sure if warp drives ultimately. I mean, warp drive may or may not come to fruition. But I think if we at least have a base on Mars, that's going to create a forcing function for the improvement in space transport technology, and gives us the best chance of ever achieving something like a warp drive that would enable
travel easily.
Yeah.
But listen, Scotty, Spock, let's talk about now.
Okay.
All right, right this second.
Sure.
Good movie, by the way.
Yeah, it's recommend seeing the new Star Trek.
It's a terrific movie. And by the way, Larry Elson's son produced it, which is
that's right.
oddly enough. What's happening now? What's available now for us? Not warp drive, not transporter beams or whatever.
The big breakthrough that's needed in rocketry is to achieve a fully and rapidly reusable rocket. And it's important to have those. Those are important qualifications because if you think of any other mode of transport, like a plane or a bike, car, anything, horse, they are
reusable.
Yeah, and they're reusable quickly and fairly completely apart from maintenance schedules.
And the only one we have, the United States at least built, or anybody built, I think, was the shuttle.
Right.
And that was
partly
usable, but not quickly.
And it was only partly reusable. So the main tank, the big orange thing, was not reusable. That was guaranteed to be expendable every time. And it wasn't just the tank. That big orange thing was actually the primary airframe to which the orbiter, the plane pot, and the side booster is attached. So even in a best-case scenario, it would not have been reusable in a substantial way. And then it took an army of 10,000 people 9 months to refurbish a shuttle for flight, which is obviously not rapidly reusable. So in order to have a breakthrough, you have to have a fully and rapidly reusable rocket. And we're making progress in that direction. And I'm hopeful that sometime in the next couple of years, we'll be able to achieve full and rapid reusability of the first stage, which is about 3/4 of the cost of the rocket. And then with a future design architecture, achieve full reusability.
And how long does it take to get to Mars? With whatever the technology is you plan to use?
With relatively sort of standard rockets, a low energy trajectory would be about 6 months. Well, you can compress it down to 3 months without too much trouble.
And you're not, and there's no, you're talking about a humans on this rocket going to Mars?
Sure, yeah.
So, are there any dangers? I have read that there are radiation.
Are there dangers?
What could possibly go wrong? That's ridiculous. Come on.
I don't even like to drive with you. I mean.
Yeah.
Vice versa, by the way.
Yeah. So there's probably some challenges along the way, but I think it's possible. I think we could make it work. Like, think of it this way: if we're not violating any laws of physics. It's difficult but achievable, and I think we should really try our hardest to make it happen.
And why Mars?
Well, Mars is the only place where we could really create a self-sustaining civilization on a planet scale.
Can you
explain these for people who don't know, like myself?
Okay. Well, if you look at the various planets, we've got Mercury's too close to the sun. Venus is
hot.
Yeah. I mean, the rocks melt on Mercury, so
that's a no.
Yeah, toasty. And then Venus is still pretty hot, several hundred degrees, and it's high, and the atmosphere is high pressure, and it's acidic. So it's a high pressure hot acid bath.
So we actually thought of having a D conference on Venus. It's not going to work. Yeah.
I'd say that Venus would be very challenging. And then Mars, obviously, is on the other side of Earth, and it's colder than Earth, but the temperature on Mars actually gets above room temperature on Earth on a hot day in the summer. And you could warm Mars up over time with greenhouse gases, and kind of the opposite of what we're doing on Earth. Yeah,
this is great.
To export our greenhouse gases.
And we're good at that. You can bring all the gas cars.
You can bring
there.
all the GM cars there.
Yeah. Mars's atmosphere is primarily carbon dioxide, which shows you how long. I mean, it's been there for 4 billion years. Shows you how long carbon dioxide lasts. It hangs around for a while.
Also, how slowly it warms up a planet.
Yeah. Well, it's quite a thin carbon dioxide atmosphere. But if you would,
but we could bulk it up.
We could bulk it up.
We know.
Absolutely.
We have practice. We know how to do that.
Exactly. So, Mars is. Is a sort of it's a fixer-upper of a planet, but we could make it work. We could make it work.
Now, do you want to go there yourself? I know you said you didn't want to die in a rocket accident.
Right.
You'd rather just die on Mars.
You want to die on impact, yeah.
Right. You don't want to die on impact, but you don't mind dying there.
Yeah, I mean, all things considered, I mean, if one's going to die anywhere, it'd be kind of cool to die on Mars.
I'm going with Hawaii, but okay.
Yeah.
All
right. So I think that that'd be neat. But I just think the things that kind of get me going are like, I think it's just really important to me and I think to probably a lot of people in this room, that if you look to the future, that it's an inspiring, exciting thing. The future is better than the present, or at least has a good chance of being better than the present. And I think that's the main driver for me. It's like, okay, will we be a spacefaring civilization, or will we be confined to Earth? I think it would be so much better if it was the former.
Right now, your rockets, though, are for doing payloads, and it's you're trying to make a business out of it, too, correct? I mean,
yeah, absolutely. So we've got to keep SpaceX, we've got to pay the bills.
Right.
And so what SpaceX does is launch satellites for commercial customers and do space station servicing for NASA. So we won the primary contract to do space station transport of cargo to and from the space station. In fact, we're the only craft capable of bringing significant cargo back from the space station.
But it's not readily reusable yet.
Correct. It's not.
So your breakthrough, in a sense, has been to do what NASA and the Soviets used to do, or still do to some extent. The Soviets still do it, but to do it via a private company.
Yeah, I'd say our breakthroughs thus far on the SpaceX side are incremental in nature, not revolutionary, and the aspiration is to have a revolutionary breakthrough. And I should point out that the cost of the propellant in the rocket is only about 0.3% of the cost of the vehicle. So it's maybe a couple $100,000 to refuel the rocket, and whereas it costs sort of $60 million. Which it makes sense if you think about planes. Like, how much does a plane cost versus refueling a plane?
Right.
Big difference. Nobody would be flying if you had to buy a new plane every flight.
No.
Yeah.
Right. Although United should.
Right. Exactly. There's come a time when you should retire those planes.
On some of those United flights.
Yeah. There's some of them are long in the tooth. That's
when
for
you're
sure.
thinking of these things, you're doing a lot of stuff. You're kind of a busy fella. Who are your heroes? Who are you? What inspired you to be this?
Sure. Well, I think generally a lot of people that I admire in history, certainly scientists and engineers and sort of technologists in general. Obviously, I'm a big admirer of Tesla, Nikola Tesla, and many others. I mean, all the obvious people that you can imagine. I like Tesla, Edison too. Although people sometimes are surprised to hear that, since we have a company called Tesla, Einstein, Newton, just like Darwin. A big fan of Ben Franklin. I think he's just an awesome example of a great human being in history. So I'd say that people like that.
And are there, obviously you were one of the pioneers of an important internet company, PayPal. Did anybody else in the kind of IT area inspire you? I mean, obviously all those people you mentioned are really great geniuses, but they were kind of well before they were more scientists and and inventors well before the IT era, or is it just too early in the IT era?
No, absolutely. I admire anyone who's worked hard to accomplish some great thing. I mean, it's worthy of admiration. So, obviously it's hard not to admire someone like Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, or in sort of present day, big fan of Larry Page, a good friend of mine. What him and Sergey have done there is pretty awesome. So, yeah.
And then probably many journalists.
I'm not against journalists, honestly.
No, I know. Look, you're here.
Yeah, exactly.
But when you talk about the internet of today, how do you look at it? You were in a very clear part of the internet that was, and I remember you were Mr. Web 1.0. Like there was,
right,
and you did in fact pose in front of cars. I remember there was some car picture that you
did.
A Porsche or a Fiat.
It was a McLaren F1.
Right, exactly.
So
you weren't close.
No.
So I
don't know what that is. It's a man thing.
And I'll tell you, Siri, I actually do. Haven't told anyone this in a while, but I do actually still own one gasoline car, which is a 67 Series 1 E-Type Jag.
I don't know which. Great.
Yeah, I know exactly what it is. Some of us know.
I have a Mazda 5. I like it a lot. Okay.
But when I was sort of in college, I was reading about the McLaren F1, and it's just an engineering work of art. I mean, it's just really, really done right. And so I thought, if I ever made enough money that I'd buy the McLaren F1. So I was actually living in an apartment in Palo Alto that cost significantly less than the car.
I remember that picture.
Yeah, and it was either upgrade to a house or buy the car. And I bought the car. Yeah.
And
were you married at the time?
I was, actually, yeah.
Well, and you posed in front of it. It was quite a symbol of the time, I recall.
You know, yeah, exactly. I mean, it probably wasn't the best idea, but there was, in fact, it was kind of funny. It was this show, which was like, if there was ever sort of a show on hubris, it would probably be, it was called Silicon Valley Gold Rush. Mm-hmm. And it was literally filmed in 1999. And so they filmed me getting the McLaren and a number of other people as well. Fortunately, PayPal worked out. Otherwise, it would have been extremely embarrassing.
Right. Did you go like, ooh, I got one or something?
No, I didn't do that. But I was pretty excited about getting it.
Right. So when you look at the Internet of today, and then we're going to get to questions, since there's lots of questions from the audience, I'm sure. What do you think of the rest of the space, the photo sharing? Is it meaningless, given you're going to Mars and everything, or is it, what's the...
I mean, people are like, Vine! I can, do a selfie, which is animated. And a lot of people, are kind of excited about it. I love them.
Yeah.
Kara did some great ones.
Absolutely.
But it's not having
a car going to
two
Mars.
Planetary habitats.
Right.
It's like a different thing,
Right.
Or even being able to drive from New York to L.A. on electric
power.
On electric power
What
only.
what do you think of when you look at the Internet right now? About what's developing and what's happening?
Well, no, I mean, I think I'm not dismissive of things like photo sharing apps and that kind of thing. I think I mean, there's a lot of things where it provides, say, a small amount of value to a lot of people, and that sums up to some large value, and that's still good. I mean, if people are able to share photos of their friends and family in a better way, I think that makes their lives better. And if that puts a high value on the company, so be it. I think that's not that bad. I mean, I think we've got an enormously a lot of talented people, a lot of talented entrepreneurs, venture capitalists, and others in the internet arena. And I think it would be great if some of those people would actually go to other arenas that could use their talent. I mean, that's the only thing that I would say is...
Well, there is this concept. Someone the other day when I was asking him what's going on in Silicon Valley, and he said, very smart guy, he said, there's a lot of big minds chasing small ideas.
Right.
And I sometimes, the ninth kind of silly little thing, you're like, wow, these are fantastic, and yet, like, everyone's making Twinkies.
Right.
Kind of thing, at some level. And
yeah, I mean, yeah. I think there's probably... I mean, I'd recommend that people consider arenas outside of the internet, because there's a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of industries that could use that entrepreneurial talent and the skills that people have learned in creating companies, and then there's actually a lot of opportunity in these industries, particularly ones where they've been kind of dominated by an oligopolistic set of companies for a long time. Oligopolies are not, or duopolies and monopolies are not great at innovation. Innovation comes from new entrants to an arena. And so when an industry has had the absence of new entrants, it tends to have very limited innovation, which also means that if you do get a break on through the other side, then there is a lot of opportunity for a company that's created there.
So what are you doing next? Because we're kind of bored with these last two.
Well, I think I'll be occupied with Tesla and SpaceX for a long time. But
is there one other arena you'd love to do?
Don't you have a solar thing?
Solar.
Yeah. In fact, but I should clarify that a lot of times people ascribe the success of SolarCity to me, but it really should be ascribed to my cousins, the co-founders, Lyndon and Peter Rive. I mean, I provide some strategic advice. And I suggested that they do a company in the solar arena. but they deserve the vast majority of the credit for that outcome, and it certainly shouldn't be ascribed to me.
Okay.
All right.
Well, we're going to take some questions.
Thank you, by the way. And by the way, Elon said to me he wasn't, why would we want him here? He's not a technologist, just so you know.
Well, no.
And I just was like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, no, I'm a technologist, but I'm not an internet. So I'm not like digital. That's the thing. It's like, I was like, okay, all things digital. Well,
there's nothing digital.
I'm not exactly digital.
But there's nothing digital in the Tesla?
There are digital things. But it's, yeah. It didn't say all things digital and physical. And then it would be like more sense.
All right.
Let's get to the question, Shervin.
It would just be called All Things.
All Things. That's our new name. We may need one.
Oh, you want to start over there? Okay.
Hi, Shervin Pishavar from Sherpa. Hi, Elon.
Hey, Shervin.
I've been coming here for many years, and all of us who have been here for many years we're always inspired to see Steve Jobs here. And obviously, we all miss him deeply, but somehow your presence here and your inspiration really eases that pain. So thank you for coming.
Oh, wow. What do you say?
Elon, there is one idea you have that we've discussed before, which is Hyperloop. And
right.
I would love for you to tell this audience what that is and how it could change our world again. Thank you.
Yeah. I would actually love to answer that question, but if I do, that will be the news tomorrow. Whereas I need to do the Tesla news.
You did that.
Yeah. So, yeah. I think probably I'll be able to talk about the Hyperloop idea in pretty soon. There's a Tesla announcement we've got next month, or so around June 20th or so, and I think I think at some point after that, that should hopefully that will be a good time to talk about the Hyperloop idea. But for those that aren't aware, the basic thought is there a better way to travel quickly from, say, downtown LA to downtown San Francisco, or LA to San Francisco, that's better than the high-speed rail that's being proposed? Because the high-speed rail, that's what originally got me to think about, is there some better way to do it? Because the high-speed rail that's being proposed would actually be the slowest bullet train in the world and the most expensive per mile in the world, which is, these are not the superlatives we're looking for.
Kind of like our internet here.
Yeah. But I think it's a little depressing to sort of have something that's like the slowest bullet train in the world in California at enormous cost. And isn't there something better that we could come up with?
And that something better is the Hyperloop?
Well, I think so, probably.
But I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
But I want to ride on it.
Yeah. I think, even if I'm sort of wrong about the economic assumptions behind the Hyperloop, it would still be a really fun ride. Even if only one of it ever existed, it would be a really fun ride.
I don't know what it is. Is it a train? A plane?
No.
An automobile?
It's
transporter machine?
It's a cross between a Concorde and a railgun.
A Concorde and a railgun. Okay.
Yeah.
But you're not. You don't.
I'll throw something else in there just to make it sound even more bizarre. It's a cross between a Concorde, a railgun, and an air hockey table.
But
if they did a three-way and had a baby
you
somehow.
You wouldn't want to go a little bit beyond that? Or?
Oh, my God.
Okay.
Let's go.
Let's go.
San Francisco is in.
Yeah.
Okay. Three-way and a baby. We love it.
Wait, Esther.
Thank you.
And Max will help have that.
Since you're feeling so loquacious tonight,
okay.
When are you planning to take the first people up into orbit, whether it's the space station or Bigelow or whatever?
She wants to go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we're working on version 2 of our Dragon spacecraft, and in partnership with NASA. So this is NASA's our biggest customer, although we also expect to transport private citizens, and we think we'll probably see the first flights of people in 2 to 3 years. So
thank you.
Bye,
Are you selling
Esther.
them?
Nice knowing you.
No. I'm retiring on Mars, but not yet.
Okay.
Yes, over here.
Allison Sheridan from Raytheon, and I am behind the camera. Now I know why everybody's been saying that. I'm looking right to the camera. Okay. Thanks to your presence at All Things D a couple of years ago, I did get a chance to drive the Tesla Roadster. That was so much fun.
Cool.
I scared the guy, though. He got a little nervous. But what I actually wanted to ask you about was we've talked a lot here about the importance of STEM education and trying to encourage that, and it's been suggested that part of our strategy really should be immigrant STEM-type people, and I'm just guessing that with your background, maybe you have some interesting perspective on that.
Oh, we forgot that question.
Yeah.
Oh, you're welcome.
Great question.
Well, I do think
Zuckerberg.
Yeah.
I do think we should be, I mean, if there's some really talented grad students at American colleges, it's crazy to send them home or force them to go home in a lot of cases. So I think we should have some reform of immigration policy that actually has us, you know, arguably for recruiting. I mean, we should think of like if this was a company, if the United States was a company, you'd be working hard to recruit top people, and you certainly wouldn't be expelling them. That would be crazy. So we should definitely have some reform on that front. And it does inure to the benefit of other countries, but we should try to have them stay here, I think. But with respect to STEM in general, I think to the degree that there are exciting technology projects that kids in school can read about and say, okay, I'd like to work on that or be part of that. That is what draws people into science and technology. And like the biggest thing I think in history that is on that front has been was the Apollo program. I think there's probably not been any single thing that's been more powerful in drawing kids in, because they're like, wow, we sent something in. I want to help make that happen, or you know, and go beyond that. So I think it's really important to have those projects that kids can read about and want to be part of in school, and that will really draw them.
Since we just touched on immigration, can you explain what happened with the political lobbying effort started by Mark Zuckerberg that you were supporter of, but then you withdrew along with some others? What was that all about?
Yeah. So initially, when I was, you know, I agreed to be part of Forward US because I do believe in immigration reform. I think we need to, you know, we've got some really antiquated laws, we need to change them, and there are some, you know, other things that also need to be on the agenda. So I thought, okay, I'll support that, and but I think that the methods that were employed, I mean, it was a little too much of the sort of Kissinger-esque realpolitik, you know, and that wasn't. I mean, I think we should try to make things happen for like the right reason, and we shouldn't give in to the cynicism of politics. I mean, we should fight the cynicism. And if we do anything to encourage that, then we'll get the political system that we deserve.
Okay. I think maybe.
Okay, great. Dan.
Dan Simon with CNN. Elon, given the runaway success and reviews of the Model S, you have to believe that the other car makers are going to be gunning for you. So I'm wondering how the company is going to keep its competitive edge, because you know that success can be a fleeting moment. Also, when do you think that electric vehicles will overtake gasoline vehicles? And finally, wondering if you have a message for the nation's oil companies.
Sure. Well, I really hope that the large car companies make a concerted effort to create electric vehicles. And ultimately, if Tesla makes competitive electric cars, then we'll deserve to be around. And if we don't, then we don't deserve to be around. I mean, you know, I'm optimistic that we'll be able to make good products. And so far from being concerned about other car companies coming in, we're actually doing our best to convince them to make electric cars, and in fact to make powertrains for them, you know, where they will allow us to do so. So I hope they look at the success of the Model S, and that encourages them to make a big move into electric cars. And as for the oil companies, you know, the tricky thing is the way the system is set up, because we have an unpriced externality. We have this tragedy of the commons problem with the CO2 capacity of the oceans and atmosphere. The incentive structure is such that the oil companies have, it's hard to ask the CEO of an oil company to act against their best interests. That's the thing. In fact, if they do, they might get fired by their shareholders. So the right thing for us to do is to change the rules of the game so that it incents the right behavior. And that's why I'm a big believer of a carbon tax is the right way to go. And we don't even have to necessarily change the amount of money that we collect from the tax base, but I do think it's sensible to disproportionately tax things that at least have a likelihood of being bad. So just as we, on a personal level, will tax tobacco and alcohol, and tobacco particularly is bad, and that's a well-established fact, we should disproportionately tax CO2 emissions. And then I think the right behavior will occur. So, I have a hard time condemning the oil and gas companies because the current system incents them to do bad behavior.
That tax gets passed along, though, to consumers and ultimately hurts the economy.
No, see, if the amount of revenue being generated is the same, it's not going to we need to collect a certain amount of money to pay for the federal government, and how we collect that is, you collect that in a wide range of ways. But effectively, what we're doing is we're saying a portion of somebody's labor has to go to federal government activities, and it doesn't. It's not going to negatively affect the economy, really, how we collect that money. People may think it has a negative effect, but it really doesn't. It's the same. It's a certain amount of money collected to pay for the federal government. So like I said, we don't actually need to change the amount of money raised, but we need to weight it towards the things that are more likely to be bad than things that are more likely to be good. I guess, where I have an issue with the oil and gas guys is when they, sometimes engage in nefarious tactics, or things that are sort of somewhat insidious, like funding academic studies that people can then point to as though they have some credibility, and it's some prominent professor somewhere, but that person has been paid off by the oil industry to write that study. It's so that kind of thing obviously should be condemned in the strongest words, and I'd recommend people read a book called Merchants of Doubt that actually spells it out in detail how some of these things are going on, where oil and gas industry is all they need to do is to create doubt, and that's what they've done. In fact, they've actually employed a lot of individuals and firms that were employed by the tobacco industry, like literally the same people. You're surprised that some of these people are still around because they're they're quite old. But in some cases, literally the same people have been employed by the oil and gas industry.
Okay.
Get to this.
Thanks. We only have a couple more questions.
Hi, Jared from Scribd. Thank you so much for coming, Elon. My question is about SpaceX. So even without a fully and rapidly reusable rocket, you've still managed to reduce the cost to orbit by an order of magnitude or more, just with more incremental improvements.
Yeah.
And so, firstly, at what point did you realize that such an opportunity existed in the space field? And secondly, are there other parallel opportunities in other areas that you wish somebody else would chase, even if you don't personally have time to do them all?
Sure. So when I started SpaceX, it was actually, I thought the most likely outcome was that we would fail. In fact, I thought that was really very likely that SpaceX would fail. So it wasn't really with the expectation of success that I started the company, obviously. but what gave me a clue that we could make a significant breakthrough was looking at the cost of a rocket, and instead of looking at it with reference to what other rockets had cost in the past, I said, okay, well, what is a rocket made of? What are the material constituents? What metals, carbon fiber, what are the various materials that constitute a rocket? And if you had a pile of those materials arrayed before you and you could wave a magic wand, what would that rocket cost to build? And that is a remarkably small number. It was maybe a few percent, or 1 or 2% of what rockets actually cost. So clearly, people were doing something silly in how they were putting those materials together. And so just by eliminating those sort of foolish things, we were able to make a rocket for much less. And then it wasn't obvious to me that one could achieve full and rapid reusability because Earth's gravity is right on the cusp of where that's possible or not possible. In order to achieve that, everything has got to be done super, super well, every aspect of the vehicle. So it was only maybe 2 or 3 years ago, or maybe 3 years ago, that I thought it was actually achievable. Now I'm fairly certain it's achievable, but there's still a long way to go between here and there. And as mentioned before, we've not yet recovered a single rocket stage, so we have a long way to go.
Okay, I think this has to be the last question.
Yeah, hi, Elon. Greg Tarr from Cross Pacific Capital up in Palo Alto. Question for you. I used to work for Toyota's U.S. headquarters, and when we, in 1990, scaled up the Lexus dealership network, it was pretty tough. And I wanted to get an understanding of what kind of innovation you're going to bring in terms of the service area. It generally takes 300 dealerships to support about 100,000 units, and you're doing a tremendous job, which I admire. And I want to understand what your plans are, because eventually the middle part of the country will begin to understand the revolution happening on the east and west coasts. How will you make it happen in the dealership network and service?
Yeah, well, service, in fact, for the last 3 or 4 months has been my main focus at Tesla. It was 3 or 4 months ago. Our service was okay, and in some cases quite bad. In particular,
someone asked me about that, the weird service of Tesla. But go ahead.
Yeah, I'd say we had some pretty nightmarish service situations, probably in the January, February timeframe. Things have gotten steadily better, but like, for example, LA was a problem for a really long time, because we were supposed to have 3 service centers open, and permits were delayed on 2 of them, so we were operating at 1/3 capacity. So as long as your Model S didn't break down, you had an awesome experience. If it broke down, it was brutal. So now we've got all 3 open. Things are a lot better. But it is going to take an enormous amount of work to scale service across the country and then internationally. We start delivering in Europe in July. So yeah, I don't know if I've got any brilliant insights that you probably know all the things that I would say, but we've got to have really good diagnostics tools, and we do have an advantage in that the car has so much intelligence in it. It can do a lot of self-diagnostics, and we can query, what parts need to be fixed on the car before it even comes in, so we can be more efficient in our service. And then something we announced recently was that we're building this fleet, or largely have built at this point, this fleet of service loaners, so that if your car breaks down, what we'll do is, and we also have valet service, so if your car breaks down or you need service, we will go to wherever your car is and replace it with one of our top-of-the-line cars. So our service loaners are not sort of the standard cars. They're actually the top-of-the-line cars. So we'll just valet a service loaner to wherever you are, pick your car up, take it, get serviced, and then return your car when it's done. So the experience should be really seamless. You should really feel like you got actually an even better car than the one that you had serviced for some period of time, and it was no interruption to your life. I mean, that's the most important thing. Lexus did this to some degree. I'm not sure if Lexus does the full valet thing or not, but certainly did the service loaner program, which was done really well, actually.
Elon, thank you so much.
We really appreciate it.
Thank you.